The adventure genre has always been something we've loved.
Exploration creates an engaging level of suspense.
This genre becomes deeper when written centuries ago.
Adventure books written in the age of exploration add an additional layer of immersion.
We also love books with a hint of fantasy.
And that's why we chose to cover
Gulliver's Travels. Upon reading Gulliver's Travels, anyone can see how Jonathan Swift was an important and influential author and satirist. Born in Dublin in 1667, he grew up in a family of important literary connections. In 1688, he became secretary to an English diplomat. From that moment on, he became involved in politics. This drove him to create satirical pieces based on religion and politics that he experienced every day. Many of his novels attracted critics, such as Queen Anne of England, who called one of his first novels, A Tale of Tub, blasphemous. This book, however, helped him gain popularity and influence, and he eventually began to write Gulliver's Travels. Many parts of his books serve as symbols and metaphors for important political events of the time. But even after these references have long been forgotten, his books still attract large audiences.
Gulliver's Travels takes place in the 1700s and follows the mule Gulliver, who embarks on 4 different expeditions to unexplored territories. He lands at places such as Lilliput, where the people are half a foot tall, or Rungdingdag, where the babies are towering giants. Gulliver also finds himself on a land of mystics and floating islands, and a place where the animals domesticate the people. Against all odds, Gulliver survives his trip and develops a new sense of who he is as a person.
The main theme of Gulliver's Travels is the ignorance of Western society. Gulliver visits various lands and discovers prosperous and utopian people who do not struggle with conflicts in government like people in Europe do. One quote that supports this is when Gulliver is discussing the politics of Europe with the king of Brobdingnag, who rules a prosperous nation, yet is ignorant of the quarrels of court in Europe. The king says, "My little friend Grildrig, you have made a most admirable panegyric upon your country. You have clearly proved that ignorance, idleness, and vice are the proper ingredients for qualifying a legislator, that laws are best explained, interpreted, and applied by those whose interest and abilities lie in perverting, confounding, and deluding them." Another quote that supports the theme of the ignorance of Western society is when Gulliver spends time with the Houyhnhnms. During a conversation with Gulliver's master, Gulliver said, "He added, how I had endeavored to persuade him that in my own and other countries, the Yahoos acted as the governing, rational animal, and held the Houyhnhnms in servitude. That he observed in me all the qualities of a Yahoo, only a little more civilized by some tincture of reason. The Yahoos are a wild, savage people, but the horses of the Houyhnhnms see no difference between the European society which Gulliver described and the Yahoos which live in their own country. The only difference between European society and that of the Houyhnhnms is that the Yahoos govern in Europe, which is precisely why European society is in so much turmoil."
My favorite passage from the book goes, "My reconcilement to the Yahoo kind in general might not be so difficult, if they would be content with those vices and follies only which nature has entitled them to. I am not in the least provoked at the sight of a lawyer, a pickpocket, a colonel, a fool, a lord, a gamester, a politician, a warmonger, a physician in evidence, a suborner, an attorney, a traitor, or the like. This is all according to the due course of things. But when I behold a lump of deformity and disease, both in body and mind, smitten with pride, it immediately breaks all the measures of my patience." This quote is significant because it essentially sums up all of what Gulliver learned from his travels. He refers to the Europeans as Yahoos, as to say that they're savage and uncivilized. This quote is also significant because it shows how Gulliver, because of his travels, has been able to identify the criminal, corrupt, and bad parts of society, and now he shudders at the thought of them, instead of simply viewing them as a normal part of society as he had done before. He learned that from his different travels to the societies all around the world, that a true utopian society can be met for his, if the people in that society would become less self-centered and corrupt.
My favorite quote from Gulliver's Travels is, "Difference in opinions has cost many millions of lives. For instance, whether flesh be bread or bread be flesh, whether the juice of a certain dairy be blood or wine." The parts of the quote where it mentions bread and wine are referring to the blood and body of Christ during communion. It calls into question the basis on which many wars were fought in human history, and that basis is religion. This religious intolerance is a toxic human characteristic which Gulliver discovers after his journeys to many differing societies.
My favorite quote from Gulliver's Travels is, "For they have no conception how a rational creature can be compelled, but only advised or exhorted, because no person can disobey reason without giving up his claim to be a rational creature." This quote displays Gulliver's wonder in how the civilization he encounters has a very different yet more positive process in which they conduct society. This contrasts Gulliver's home and the society he lives in, as the people there must be compelled to abide by the laws. Gulliver is simply stating that the people he encounters at home are beyond reason and do not know rational thought.